Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Bradley Butler, and I am the Executive Director and Curator at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, New York. Tonight's event is an artist talk with Courtney Hassmann, Brandon Bishop, and Mariana Baquero. And this artist talk is part of a series of online events in conjunction with our exhibition, The Cup, the Mug. These three artists are included in this year's exhibition, which is an online invitational. And this year's show includes 98 cups by 20 artists from 12 states. And fun fact, both Courtney and Mariana were featured in our spring 2020 national juried exhibition called Bibliospectaculum, which was a national juried exhibition of artist books and text-based visual works. So we're glad to see them again and glad to get to know Brandon a bit here. So before we hear from them, I'm just going to briefly introduce them and show you their work. Courtney Hassmann, a ceramic artist in Houston, Texas. She received her BFA from the University of North Texas in 2016, and she pinches pots, cries a lot, and loves her pets to death. So I like that statement. It's very, very concise and memorable. Mariana Baquero was a corporate lawyer until she discovered the pleasures of working with clay. She graduated from the University of Florida with an MFA in ceramics in 2016, and she is currently the arts specialist at the J. Wayne Rates Union Arts and Crafts Center at the University of Florida. And Brandon Bishop is a local from Georgia, and he grew up in Hawkinsville, Georgia. In 2014, moved to Athens, Georgia to pursue his education in arts at the University of Georgia. He received his BFA emphasis in ceramics in 2018, and right after graduation, Brandon became the studio assistant for Maria Dondero, and he continues to practice his pottery in Athens, Georgia. So thank you all for joining us. And before we get kind of into the heart of the talk, I'd like to just have each of you, tell us a little bit more about yourselves. I guess I started with Courtney. So Courtney, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I would love to. So I did actually just move a couple months ago to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So no longer in Houston, but I am from there, so it's, still counts. But yeah, so I went to University of North Texas, started as a graphic design major, and then quickly realized I hated being on the computer so much. Someone subbed for one of my design classes who was a ceramics grad student. And then I changed my major immediately. So then been making pots ever since then. I taught a little bit, realized I hated teaching, and then COVID came along and helped me out of that because I got furloughed. But then I was able to start making work full time. And yeah, I pinch everything, and I like to write little words about walking my dog and crying and sitting in the sunshine, and yeah, that's about it.
Great. Well, thank you for that. We'll dig more into some of that for sure as we get talking here. Mariana, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I live in Gainesville, Florida, a nice little college town. I actually have a background in law, as you read in my statement. I was a political science major at the University of Florida in Gainesville many, many years ago. While I was there, I did take some ceramics classes in the local Arts and Crafts Center, which is where I work right now. So I loved it. I loved those classes. I really enjoyed my time in the studio, but I was a political science major, so I went on to law school. I worked as a lawyer for a bit, and I just realized that, it wasn't for me, and I ended up coming back to ceramics. And so I ended up coming back to University of Florida for an MFA in ceramics. So it's this amazing full circle. When I graduated, I ended up getting a job at the Arts and Crafts Center, where I took my first ceramics classes and I fell in love with clay. So it's a really, I don't know, it's a kind of amazing the way things work out sometimes. And so I've been there 6 years now, which it doesn't feel like 6 years. It feels like just yesterday. But it's an amazing place to work. I love teaching there, mostly because it's non-academic teaching. So I'm not, I'm not grading people on their effort or their ability. It's just the pure joy of making, which is one of the benefits of working for a community studio. So it's the best job ever. I feel really lucky. And then I still have the ability to work on my own work and develop my own artistic practice. And so I value that a lot. Have access to, amazing facilities and glazes and kilns as part of my job. So it's a huge benefit. And I mostly work with text on the surface of my work. So I've been primarily working with family stories recently, although I've started to get into writing some of my own personal stories and making stamps out of those. It's feeling a little bit vulnerable right now. I don't know when I'll be comfortable putting that actually on cups and sending it out into the world. I think that might be a little bit of a process. It's so much easier when it's someone else's story. But that's the next. And my work is a combination of hand building and wheel throwing. I like to do both. But I would love to do pinching, actually. I taught a pinch pot class recently, and man, there's something about pinching that it's just so soothing to me. And I want to figure out a way to incorporate that into my work.
Yeah, I think, pinching is not only reserved for friends and relatives. You can do it to clay also.
Yeah. In fact, it's probably more appreciated by the clay than your friends and relatives.
That's right. Great. Well, thank you very much. And Brandon, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got introduced to clay probably when I was at UGA. I went through probably three different majors when I was in college. Originally thought I was going to do business. Didn't really care for it as much. Thought I was going to go in painting and drawing, and that didn't really work out. And then I wanted to do art education. And I think with the art education department, they forced you to take a ceramics class as part of the curriculum. And that's how I got introduced to it at UGA. I had a very amazing teacher who was very creative, and also his work was very great, but he also knew how to push people to do more. And I think that's really what got me to pursue the medium. And so I picked the major, went with it, and pursued it, graduated in 2018. And right before I graduated, luckily I had the opportunity to be a studio assistant for a potter in town, Maria Dondero. And I still work for her today, still today, since 2018. And after that graduation, I was hopping from 2 communal studios, and then I've luckily had the opportunity to acquire my own.
Great. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And I think I'd like to start out, with the, little discussion here with something you all have in common. Each of you with the work in this show and, other broader bodies of work all use text on your pots. I mean, Mariana, you kind of really touched on it specifically, and Courtney, you did too. But, if you could each talk a little bit about that, what drove you to start doing that. And maybe Courtney, you could share some with Mariana, vulnerabilities, how do you, do that for the world, right? Because yours seems very personal, what you put on your pots. So, and anyone can go first in this little, whatever you want to add.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind going first. I first got interested in text mostly as a way of like preserving like stories. Like I had these like letters and postcards that my parents wrote to each other. And I wanted some way of putting them on the surface of pots. And so I experimented with, laser decals and other types of things like that. And then I came across laser stamps where you can raster, an image onto plywood using a laser cutter. And so that's when I started putting their handwritten letters. And then I started writing my own and putting like stories that my parents told me on making plywood stamps out of those. And so then I'm slowly leaning into like telling my own stories or things about myself, because I realize it's so much easier to tell other people's stories. It's not as vulnerable. It's not as, it's not as personal. And so that's kind of been the evolution. And I really like the physical texture of the stamp and the kind of pattern that the handwriting created. And my handwriting is terrible. It's always been terrible. I am of the generation where we had to learn cursive and we had to practice it and we were graded on it. And it was just a traumatizing experience. I still remember to this day that I was just terrible at it. And so now putting my handwriting on a piece of art, I don't know, it feels a little subversive to me. I like the fact that people are like, oh, this is beautiful. And I'm like, that's right, it's my handwriting. But having my handwriting and then telling my story, that's a step that's a little bit harder for me. I have found it to be, I've written the stories, but I have not yet been able to like make the stamp and put it on the surface. And that's going to be the next process.
Yeah, and with your work, Mariana, the text also offers an overall texture. I mean, so I think, do you feel like people really have to look hard in order to see that? Or do you feel like it's, even no matter how hard they have to look, is it still like, oh, it's glaringly obvious to me?
Yeah, well, I have flip-flopped back and forth on the pieces that I've made as to how much text I want people to be able to read. Some of my pieces, the text is very readable. I mean, you don't get the whole story, obviously, because it's just a small surface area. But some of the pieces you can really read the text and get the gist of the story. And then other pieces, the way I've applied the glaze, or sometimes I add other stamps and other patterns on top of the text to kind of obscure it, makes it a little harder to read. You kind of have to like dig into it a little bit more. And that might be the key to easing my way into telling my own stories, is where I put my own story on there, but I obscure it a little, make it a little bit harder to read. I do like the idea that people don't get the full story, right? That there's just glimpses here and there. You're not told the full story, because I do feel like, at least where the way it started with me with like family history and family stories, is that we never get the whole story, things are lost in translation, things are lost, as stories are told and retold, these apocryphal like family stories. A lot of details are lost. And so I like the way that translated to the clay, where you're getting some part of the story, but not the whole story. It creates intrigue and interest. And then every time you use the cup, maybe you get some different glimpses into the story.
That's great. And I think, Courtney, I interrupted you with my question.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I was just going to respond by saying, like, I also really love text visually. And I also really hated my handwriting for a long time. And I worked so hard to like fix my handwriting. So then, now I like it. So I have to put it everywhere. But yeah, mine started as like, ever since I've had a cell phone with a notes app, I've just put stuff in there. I don't really know why, it just always has been a thing. So then as I was making work, I started using underglaze pencil for just drawing stuff. And then it just kind of made sense for me to put like the stuff that I've been collecting in this notes app for years onto other stuff that I had already been working on, and I wanted it to be more more meaningful and conceptual, other than just like functional pots. And then I really like thinking about my stuff that's more vulnerable and like personal as song lyrics. And the way that I relate to like song lyrics is like they're pretty vague most of the time. And even if they are specific, other people, when you listen to them, it's like you put your own meaning into it. So even though it is really personal to me, once other people see it and like they put their own stuff onto it. So it's not even mine anymore. So I feel like, I don't know, that makes it feel easier to be like really vulnerable and emotional onto things that other people are seeing. Also, if it's something that's super personal, I don't post it on Instagram or anything. And I only put it on my website for someone to find, and then they have it, and then it's gone. And I really like the process of like letting go of things by actually like writing them down and shipping it away to someone else. And then they can have it and that can be their thing. So yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm definitely going to shift my thinking to that.
It helps.
Yeah, and I like that idea that it's not mine, it's ours. I like that
Yeah.
idea. That's interesting.
I'm gonna join with y'all where it's like I don't like my handwriting either. It's funny. I think that's kind of partially the reason why I don't put my own signature on my pots. It's because I don't like my handwriting, but also too, it's just I feel like my name on my own personal pot would just distract the piece in the first place. Some of the things I write on there on my own work, it can be personal. A lot of times it's just life lessons I've learned over the years. This as a reminder to my, like things I've learned from the past. Sometimes it's just the interactions and relationships I've made with people over the years, where it's like, where someone has said something that's intrigued my interest to the point it's like it's a nice memory to embrace, or like to have like a reminder. And then like you too, it's sometimes I'm just listening to a song when I'm glazing and I'm just writing a lyric on there. It's just the moment that what the music's just telling me. I'll just write a lyric on some of my pieces, and some about that can just be a moment in time.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, because there's a lot of people that put words on pots, right? But there's also a lot of people that don't. So I think it's interesting to hear what people have to say about that, especially when we have 3 people in the room here that all happen to put words on pots. So
In their own handwriting.
yeah. um, and how do you all find the balance of, I think either imagery and words, or versus the form, right? Because I mean, there's a relationship between the form and also what's on the surface. I mean, do any of you have anything to share about how you kind of make those two things go together?
I feel like that's a really hard one. Like
Well,
I
I'll let you go first. Sorry.
oh yeah, I mean I just like sometimes it really works. Like I feel like I have a really good rhythm with putting stuff onto mugs and thinking of it as like the one side is like where it starts and then it goes around. And then a lot of times when I'm making new forms, it doesn't work and I'm like lost and I don't know where to start. So I feel like I just have to get used to a form and then think of it as like a page in a certain way and like have a beginning and then an end. Like my mugs always start on one side and then end on the other side around the handle. So yeah, it's not always easy. Sometimes it just doesn't work and I don't know what to do.
For me, I think I pay attention a lot more to form now before decorating a pot. I'll throw something, and then once it's fully bisqued and when I'm decorating it, I try to imagine like, what I want to draw on there. Like if it's a person or like, putting a word on there, I try to take, placement of like where I'm going to put my pieces, the decorations on it. It's weird because like I try to focus, I do a lot of wood and salt and atmospheric firings where I don't do any of the decorations on those. And the purpose for that is just to focus more on the form and shape. And so I can bring it back to like my electric fired work. But I think I don't really have like a mindset when I'm going into decorating my own work. It's just kind of just a stream of consciousness than anything else.
Well, I'm definitely of the more is more school of thought. I mean, if you look at some of my early work, basically every technique I knew, I threw on the surface of the pot. The surface, every bit of the surface was just an opportunity to decorate. And so it's taken me a little bit to kind of back off of that and have, a little more discipline in the way that I decorate my surfaces. And, using the text as texture has helped a little bit with that. And then bringing back in some more, some other imagery in forms of stamps to kind of obliterate that texture. But and also working with bare areas of clay. So that's something that I've been working on a little bit in my mugs in particular, like having the bottom part of the mug bare, the top part of the mug decorated. But I definitely like, I want every inch of the pot to be textured and decorated. And sometimes that's a little too much. And what I find fascinating with my mugs is that I bring that texture all the way up the lip so that when you're drinking out of the mug, you can feel that texture. And I've had some people react really strongly to that. Like they'll tell me the mug is beautiful, they love it, but they can't drink out of it because that texture affects them. And I love that. Like, I love that they have that reaction to it. I love that they have that like interaction with the mug where they're interacting with it. And it's something that they're aware of, and it's not something that they can quite get used to, this idea that my handwriting is like touching their lips. I don't know, there's some weird intimacy to that, and some people like it and some people don't, and so I do like that about it.
That's interesting because that was going to be kind of a follow-up question I had is, I think about when I have a mug I'm drinking out of. I think a mug, especially a cup you can put down and then pick up in a different way, but a mug, I mean, I'll use one hand or another depending on which side the table's on or something like that. But, generally I kind of have like one experience with that mug based on that I'm a right-handed, person. So, I mean, does user experience come into play when each of you are working on your pots, or is it like, this is what I do and how people interact with it is how it happens?
I definitely did. I got feedback before because I leave my surfaces unglazed. The outside is just the raw clay. And I have gotten feedback that people didn't like the feeling of the raw clay. And so now I sand everything a lot and really smooth everything out. So it basically feels like it is glazed, but it's more of a matte glaze. But that's as far as I go to thinking of user experience.
Well, I mean, I think mugs, cups in particular, are my favorite things to make because I control everything about that user's experience. And so I definitely do think about it. I think about where I put the handle in relation to the text, what words someone might be looking at, if they're right-handed, if they're left-handed, what their lips are going to be feeling. And then when I teach my students, I tell them, you're the author of this cup. Like, you can decide what someone's experience is drinking out of this. You can make this a difficult cup to drink out of, something that cannot be just done, mindlessly while you're reading the newspaper, something that you have to really think about where you're going to put your hands, where you're going to put your lips. And I love that. I think that's my favorite thing about making cups, is that there's that intimacy, where someone's going to use it hopefully on a daily basis and interact with it in this really personal way and have a reaction to it. And I love that there's a reaction, whether it's positive or negative. I just like that there's a reaction.
Yeah, a little bit more the personal, personality of it. I try to make. When people have my work, I hope it is personal to some extent for them. Not just the function of it, but even like the words I write on it. There's been a lot of times where I've had people buy some of my work and they love the quotes on it. It's like, I use this every day because it says black, gray, and white on it. And I'm like, okay. And they'll tell me their story on, like, how both of y'all were talking about like interpretations of the user, their reason why they bought it. And I'm thinking in my head, like, that's not the reason why I wrote that on there. But but I do think a lot about like the function of my pieces also, where it's, where the handle is placed, where, the lips beveled and as such, when like how, my pictures are drawn on it. But it's kind of funny where I think it's interesting where people like will read something and then like create their own story and like manifest like an imagination of their own.
Yeah, and I think that having words, I mean, it kind of lends itself to that. I mean, words are important. They tell stories, they communicate. But if you're not giving a full story or you're just giving a little glimpse of something, I think that then people can create something in their own, that makes it even more personal to them. So I think that that's great. Yeah. And I like that. Well, I thought it'd be funny if you all said like, oh, we don't care about the user experience.
I actually do care a lot, and I want that to be known, that I want it to be really functional. I want people to use it every day. So I do care a lot about that.
For sure.
But,
I just
at the
thought it'd
same
be funny.
time, at the same time, I guess I don't want it to be like this mindless thing that they don't really think about. They don't have to think about.
Yeah.
Like this, because those kinds of mugs you can go and get at Walmart, and they're just utilitarian.
Yes.
I want them to be more like, I don't know, I want there to be more interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Special, but still functional.
Yeah, still functional. Yes, exactly.
It's a push and pull relationship, right? One informs the next. Yeah. Well, great. I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation. I thought it was really, the way that we put these together, as you all know, you signed up for a slot, but each week that we do these, it's really interesting, the overlap between everyone. So, the fact that you all use text and that was what we were able to focus on, I thought was really very interesting. So, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can see the Cup the Mug on our website, mainstreetartscs.org. I do know the URL. You can go onto the exhibition page for the Cup the Mug, and you can learn more about these three wonderful people, in addition to the other artists in the show. You can see their work. You can also go right onto the shop page and look on the current exhibition category and view the work just by itself too. And we just have 2 more events coming up. And this Friday, we have an event with Courtney and also with Diana Adams. So it'll be a studio tour event. So you get to see Courtney's studio as well as Diana's and learn more about things we didn't hear from Courtney today, as well as seeing the studio. And then you get to hear from Diana too. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. And we hope you all have a good night out there. Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, take care.